Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Rapid City's Legal and Finance Committee meeting for the last day of February, Wednesday, February 28th, 2018. I'd like to start with a roll call and determination of quorum. Please, Stacy. Here. Thank you. Now's the time to adopt today's agenda or make any modifications. If I don't have any modifications by the seated committee members, I will entertain a motion to adopt today's agenda.
Move to approve.
Got a motion by Laurenti to adopt today's agenda as presented, second by Armstrong. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for any public comment from the audience presented today on any items that are currently not on today's agenda. I do not have any speaker request forms for items not on today's agenda. Am I missing anyone in the audience that would like to speak on anything currently not on today's agenda? Seeing no one, we're going to move on to the consent calendar. Thank you. We're going to move on to the consent calendar, and today's consent items are items 1 through 9. I do have one speaker request form. Would you like to speak during this time, or would you like to wait until the item is discussed up here? Would you like to speak first?
Well, which would be the most influential?
Go ahead and please approach the podium. It is Dorothy, and it's item number 2.
I'm going to have Susan come with me.
All right, Susan will be joining her. If you ladies would please state your names and your residential addresses and affiliation to the city, please, and then we will hear what you have to say.
Oh, it is live. I'm Dorothy Brewick, probably better known to many people as Rowdy. I live at 2816 Linwood Drive, Rapid City, and I represent Democracy in Action and Cities for CDAW.
Susan?
And I am Susan Nolan. I live at 1164 Lookout Lane, and I am here for the same reason that Rowdy said, to talk about CDAW, and I too represent Democracy in Action.
First thing we'd like to do is tell you that CDAW, C-E-D-A-W in capital letters, is short for the Convention on the Elimination of All Discrimination Against Women. And a convention is a treaty, and what we are asking that the principles of this treaty be resolved by the Rapid City Common Council as a way of operating here in Rapid City. CDAW was passed in 1979 by the United Nations. It was signed by Jimmy Carter, and it has never made it to the Senate floor. We have 194 members of the United Nations, and 189 countries have, in some capacity, ratified CDAW. And so when it became evident that even though it was recommended passage by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, it never made it to the floor of the Senate, that women were going to have to take it into our hands to make sure that women in the United States are protected against discrimination of all forms. And so it began as a movement called Cities for CDAW, and women all over the United States are working in the same capacity as Susan and I, as far as taking an appeal to our city government and some county governments to adopt the principles of this convention.
And so cities across the United States, from Maine to California and from Florida to Washington State, are in the process of implementing at either a resolution or an ordinance level this very important document, which brings the issue of women and children to the dais, to the forefront, we hope, of your consciousness as you go about making decisions, allocating money, staffing committees and commissions and boards, and that women, who make up half of the population of our community, have some very distinct issues which we would like to be part of your thought process. So CDAW, as Rowdy has said, is a group of principles that we're encouraging you to embrace and support.
Thank you, ladies. And if this item is pulled off the consent calendar, if you wouldn't mind standing by for potential questions from any committee member, that would be fantastic.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just as a comment, since they made some general comments under consent, public comment. The item number 2 today is not to adopt the actual principles at the city level. This is a resolution in support of the principles of this. The city has some other bylaws that we have to follow regarding discrimination. So just want to make the clarification. We are not proposing that the city adopt the principles. We are supporting a resolution being brought forward by Mayor Allender that the city is in support of the principles. So when we talk about that, or if anybody else has any interest in that, just understand the distinction. Any other public comment for consent items 1 through 9 today from the audience? I don't have any other ones. Public comment is now closed on consent items 1 through 9. If any committee member would like to pull an item from today's consent calendar, the chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drury.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pull number 2.
All right. Any other items from the committee members? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt items 1 through 9, except item number 2. Got a motion by Armstrong to approve items 1 through 9, except item number 2, second by Drury. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 2 is to approve resolution number 2018-021, a resolution supporting the principles of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, also referred to as CEDAW. And the chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drury.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask a question to Nick Stute, please?
Yes, you may.
Good afternoon, Nick. Just to be clear, and you've read the resolution, the city practices this already, correctly? Correct. And is there anything that you need to expound on this resolution as far as it meets our HR policies or anything? Okay, thank you. May I ask a question of Rowdy, please, or Susan?
Yes, you may, if
Okay.
they're willing to answer you. Ladies, if you are, please approach the podium once again. We want to make sure you're heard. Nick's microphone was a little quiet there, so we want to make sure you're heard.
Okay.
Rowdy and Susan, thank you for coming today, and thank you for bringing this resolution forward. Quickly, are there any other cities in South Dakota that do this right now, that have this resolution?
We are not, no, we're not aware of any, that no other city's name appears on any list. We're hoping that we can proudly be the first city in South Dakota to pass this support of the resolution. And then we would like to contact some people in Sioux Falls. We know that a woman is running for mayor there, and this might be a good campaign strategy for her. So we would like to see more cities in South Dakota pass this resolution.
And just on another note, Becky, as you may know or may not know, March is National Women's History Month, and International Women's Day is March 8th. This would be a great commendation for women in our community if our city council decided to get behind this.
Right, I think the timing on this is great, and thank you for working with the mayor and bringing it forward. I have no further questions, if anyone else does. Thank you.
Thank you. I currently do not have a motion on the floor. The chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Armstrong.
Thank you. I, too, have some questions. What would be, what's your vision for CEDAW in Rapid City?
Well, we started out with a proclamation, and that was on Women's Equality Day, and we were very, very happy to have received that from the mayor. And I also want to thank you for entertaining our resolution and for allowing us to speak. And then once we have a resolution, it's sort of like Susan said, it puts the idea of women's participation, quality of participation in kind of in the forefront. So whatever decisions are made, we're hoping that the city council and anyone that's involved in the decision-making process is represented by women, and that women are considered when something is passed. And then our vision is eventually that a gender study would show us how many women are in positions of heads of committees and sitting on committees, and pay women's wages, pay equity, and those kinds of things. And a gender analysis would probably be part of an ordinance then.
And I'd like to say, Laura, in answer to your question, that I think that sometimes women's issues and the status of women in our community get lumped in together with everything else. They are different. There's a significant issue of safety for women in our community. There's a pay discrepancy. Women do not earn the same amount of money as men do in this community, and we could go on and on. So while it's not our position to debate these issues with you, it is our position to bring into your consciousness as you make decisions from the dais that women are part of the economic structure, the social structure, the very fabric that holds this community together.
And I would like to add to that, not only for women of this community, but I think that would behooves us to be able to say to the girls of this community, this is a place that values you, this is a place that has your future in their vision, and as witnessed by the fact that the resolution supports the principles of CEDAW. It's a feather in our cap for the state and the country, and for the young girls that we hope will stay here.
And I know you don't want to hear us talk all afternoon about this, but you can tell we have a lot to say because we're so passionate about this. There will be businesses who are women-operated businesses who will look at this community. There will be all kinds of businesses who continue to come here. And when we have a policy, or let me not say a policy, a resolution that puts women in the decision-making process, how can that be any less than attractive and promoting our community when we say we lift women up to this level?
And may I add too, and then I promise we'll wait for the next question. But the use of the word CEDAW is probably very unfamiliar to people around here, but we have people who will leave this community and go to other communities. And since this is a very, a word and a resolution that is all over the United States, they will recognize that or they will carry it with them. And when people come here who have lived in larger urban areas who are familiar with this idea, will be pleased to find out that they live in a city that made the effort to support this resolution.
Wonderful.
And thank you to the City Council. We've spoken to almost all of you who have been interested in listening to us about this.
And I'm proud to be a part of a city council that has equal gender equity, 50-50, which is historic. So I know that we are moving into that direction. Full steam ahead. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
And thank you, ladies. And I currently still do not have a motion on the floor for item 2.
Move to approve. Second.
Got a motion by Drury to approve, second by Armstrong. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are now on to public comment for the non-consent items on today's agenda. Non-consent items on today's agenda are items 10 through 20. Item 10 is a standalone on its own. Item 11 is the first ordinance of the second read for ordinances 11 through 20. Ordinances 12 through 20 are supportive or subordinate or additions to the overriding item number 11. So since this is a subcommittee, there have been no changes. I have been assured by staff there have been no changes to any of the ordinances 11 through 20. between first reading and second reading, and so if the committee wants to pull a separate one out of 12 through 20, we will consider that separately. Otherwise, we will make a motion on 12 through 20 in totality at committee level. A reminder to the public that at the city council meeting, each ordinance does need to be read in separately and will be read in separately Monday night. But for this one, we're going to be lumping 12 through 20 together in one passing unless a committee member wants to pull one separately. Public comment, I have 2 public speaker request forms. Gentlemen, if you wouldn't mind, can we, since the consent items are treated individually, do you mind if I call you up when we actually address the item? All right. So anybody else from the audience, both of those gentlemen, we're talking on item number 10. Anybody else in the audience that wants to address the committee member during public comment on non-consent items? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. The committee will now be considering item number 10. Item number 10 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6225, an ordinance to amend provisions concerning appeals to the Building Board of Appeals by amending sections 15.04.120 and 15.04.130 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. The chair would like to recognize Brad Solon, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and your affiliation with the city, and then the committee is all ears.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Brad Solon. I'm the Division Manager for Building Services. We issue building permits in the city, and I'm also the building official who is the person that would be the city staff member that would take appeals or complaints or grievances from people who might appear. And I just wanted to go over a couple of things. And just to remind, last summer, there was a similar ordinance. It was very similar to this. The building board approved that. It went to council ultimately and didn't pass 5-5. And so the proponents, who I don't believe they're here, Carla and I worked on this as a draft, the people above us brought it to us and said, get this together and present it, and based from a complaint from a citizen and contractor. Okay, so that's where this is coming from. And so just wanted to say a few things. We really don't have a dog in this fight. If the ordinance stays the same, any person aggrieved would be able to appear before me and file a complaint. Now I have to field those complaints and say, okay, this is really a civil matter, or it's a petty matter, so we're not going to revoke the person's license. Or maybe it is serious, and we'll go that way. We've done both, and it happens. What this ordinance is, or would do, any person aggrieved might not be able to get exactly what they want. If someone appears to me and says, my contractor is a jerk, or he didn't return my calls, or I had some callback work that needed to be done, and I want you to revoke his license. Or worse, they appear a year later, we issued a permit, did all the inspections, gave them a CO, and they come back and say they didn't do the warranty work that they said they would, so revoke their license. Now you can understand the position that would put the city in if we revoke somebody's license for something that we approved. So these are things that come up. Just so you know too, the county is suffering the same thing. Their ordinances are a little bit different than ours, and I've talked to Holly over at the Commissioners, and they called me on a couple of occasions, and theirs doesn't say exactly the same thing, but it's that same thing. It's who is that person, and should they be able to present a grievance? Back in the old days, the variance board appeals form, it said in state law, it said that a variance appeal you had to show that you had to do ABC and 1, 2, 3. And if you didn't have that, then you didn't get to go forward. And the same thing was on the form for the aggrieved. It said, state your grievance, and then on the next line it says, write your address and legal description in the same subdivision. And I remember Gus, back in the old days, 25 years ago, someone would appear with the grievance on a variance, and he'd say, we really appreciate you coming in today. You are not in the same subdivision. You don't have a dog in this fight. But times have changed. Now, any person can come in, pound their fist on the podium, and they get an audience. And so that's really what this is about. This ordinance would change some things, what I do. And again, it doesn't really make any difference to me. If someone appears to me with a petty issue and they want to appeal it to board, currently they can do that. And and that's fine. We can do that. This would change that somewhat. That's all it's about. And so I just wanted to get up here and talk, just to remind people what we talked about last summer and where this came from. And so, thank you.
Thank you. And so I also have a speaker request form from Mr. Asbridge. Would you mind stepping up to the podium? State your name, please, your residential address, and your affiliation for today's addressing of the committee.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is David Asbridge, and I live at 919 Columbus Street here in Rapid City. I am the chairman of the Building Board of Appeals. The idea of this amendment is well thought out. We have worked with the legal department here at the city. It has been thoroughly reviewed by our board, line by line. I believe it's a good amendment. And the reason I believe that, and I can speak for the other board members, because it was unanimously brought to you through our process. What we've experienced in the past as a board is, in many occasions, a grievance committee. And I don't believe that's our charge as a Building Board of Appeals. Now, certainly, there are instances where a grievance can somewhat overlap into our purview of code violation. And what we don't want to continue doing as a board is listening to a grievance between two parties, a contractor and their client. Because many, many times it's over workmanship, which is not a code violation. It's over contractual disagreements, which is not a code violation. And I think that's the number one reason why we're supportive, very supportive of this amendment. I don't think that this board was brought through the process of origin to act as a jury in a court. And so many times, that's what we feel like we're there trying to resolve, is a dispute. And that's not our charge. So I encourage and hope that you will seriously consider this amendment for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if you'll stand by, there may be some questions from committee members. I appreciate that. Before I turn it over to the committee members, because we are addressing item number 10, but I would like to turn it over to Mr. Ken Young. And Ken, as had already been indicated by one of the speakers, this has come before City Council before. It's coming back at us. It can't come back to the City Council once the City Council's ruled on exactly the same ordinance. So can you please address why this one is different from the one that was previously brought before?
Oh boy, that's a good question for the attorney that worked on the verbiage there. I know that the sections that were brought forward previously have been changed a little bit. The verbiage and the actual change that is being presented today is different by which sections in the code are being changed. So I wish I could answer that more specifically. I don't have that information in front of me. I apologize.
Not a problem. Carla, if you wouldn't mind stepping up to the plate here and letting us know briefly what the major changes are between the one that the City Council viewed about 6 months ago versus this one.
Definitely. We clarified. Well, there's one additional change that that kind of came up in the last 6 months that we added in, and that's a clarification about the timing of an appeal. Kinsley, who does Kinsley Powers in our office, Kinsley Grote Powers in our office, pointed out that there was some confusion about when they had to file the appeal and when you had to have a hearing. So we did clarify that, and that's new in the process. That's on page 3 of the ordinance. And then the other thing that we clarified was, and this is based on our conversation the last time we were before council, is if the dispute between the homeowner and the contractor really relates to the code, whether or not a permit is required, whether or not the code requires this standard or this standard, that is something that can be appealed to the board. And that, I mean, it still puts them in the middle of these kinds of disputes, but like I explained to them, you know, under our ordinances, the building board are the experts on our code. Nobody else, if they disagree with Brad and Brad's staff, nobody else knows the code like the building board. So those kinds of disputes would move forward. And so that is a change from the previous one, just to clarify that there is still that oversight.
All right, thank you. The chair would like to recognize Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'd like to ask Mr. Salon a question, if I may, please. Thank you, Brad. Hey, my question to you, and this is one of the sticking points before, and I just want to reiterate it so that citizens hear it from this level, and of course they'll hear it again when we have the next City Council meeting. Citizens aren't cut out of the process. There's still a process for a citizen who has what they believe might be a code violation or might be determined to be a code violation when they come to your office. Is that correct?
That's correct. We would take a good hard look at what their actual complaint is, do some investigating, and then make a determination.
So if there's a code violation or something's not followed per city code, what happens to that citizen's complaint at that point?
Likely what would happen is it would depend on the severity of the violation. If I could call the contractor, I might just be able to call them and say, listen, got a complaint, get out there, take care of it. If maybe the contractor would say, no, I'm not going to fix it, I might just send them a certified letter and say, listen, your license is at risk if you don't want to take care of this. And Wade Nyberg actually had drafted me a standard letter that I've used, and I've sent it out a number of times to people. So that's what could occur.
Okay, I appreciate it. I just wanted the public to hear that clarification. We'll probably ask that question again at the next council meeting. And I think it's important for citizens to hear that, because I think that's what's being portrayed by some of the opponents to this change, is that citizens are being cut out of the process. And the reality is they are not. And what I believe is being cut out is trying to make city council and the city the judge and jury of situations that are not code violations. And we don't want to get in between a private disagreement where somebody may need to hire representation to deal with that. But the city will deal with code violations and violations of our code. So I just wanted the public to hear that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And the chair would like to go to Mr. Ken Young, and also as a follow-up question, Mr. Young, basically to follow up on what Brad suggested. Brad covered, or Mr. Solon covered, what he would do with a complaint that comes in. The next step then is, if the contractor still doesn't do it, then if it is a code violation, it does go to the Board of Appeals. Those are the incidents that the Board of Appeals would consider and decide on. If the board then also makes a decision, at that point either party can appeal it to City Council, or is the board's decision final?
No, it could go forward to City Council at that point. The main difference here is we're looking at code. We're not looking at licensure. So that really the difference between what we have now and what we're looking to have is that we're considering the board a code appeals board, not a licensing appeals board, unless perhaps a license has been revoked by staff. Then that determination can go forward. But in best practices, as we see these boards work in other communities, is that the board is not one that takes active determinations unless it relates specifically to code. So in other words, an active determination would be to revoke someone's license. This is something that belongs with the building official in his determination. If he determines not to revoke a license, then it should not be the board's purview to also perhaps revoke a license. It's more, is it necessary to have it revoked based on code? And so then if the board makes that determination, yeah, there's definitely a code violation here and perhaps revocation should occur, then it goes back to the building official to review that again and determine whether or not that should occur. But certainly anything that the board determines is appealable to City Council.
And again, though, the restriction is being that it's got to be a building code violation.
Exactly.
Because that's what city government is actually, overseeing here is building codes. If there's
Right.
an actual complaint or a grievance between two parties, that really is what our civil courts are for.
Exactly. That should go to small claims court or other lawsuits.
All right, thank you. The chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drury.
Thank you, Chair. I had a question, but it was just answered. So it doesn't deal with plumbing codes, electrical codes, it's building. Okay, I move to approve.
Second.
I've got a motion by Drury to approve item number 10, second by Laurenti. Any further discussion? Seeing none, thank you for everyone's comments today. If possible, there may be more questions Monday night. I would encourage all of you to please join us again Monday night in case there's other questions, because only half the city council is here for this committee meeting.
We have to all say aye, right?
Yes, we're getting ready to vote. Was that the question? I had a question from Alderwoman Armstrong. She was waiting to vote. She's waited with bated breath up here to vote on this issue. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11 is the second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6228, an ordinance amendment to Title 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code by adding Chapter 17.66 entitled Urban Commercial District. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion by Laurenti to approve, second by Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Is there any of the following ordinances that do refer to the urban commercial district that a committee member would like to address separately? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve items 12 through 20.
So moved.
Second.
I've got a motion by Drury to approve items 12 through 20, second by Armstrong. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Motion to adjourn.
I've got a motion by Laurenti to adjourn,
Second.
second by Armstrong. And any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.